11. Flames of Desperation. Cuzão had found the crows in a moment of desperation, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. He had blown up a trash bin to get their attention, and when Jack, Harlequina, Harry, and Rabbit Foot rushed outside to confront the cause of the commotion, Cuzão's plea hit them like a storm. "They've got fire guns!" Cuzão cried, barely able to get the words out between gasps. "Ulf, the kids, they're still in there, burning everything. Please, you're the only ones who can help." His voice cracked, his face pale and smeared with blood and grime. The crows exchanged uneasy glances, but the weight of the boy's words and the urgency in his eyes couldn't be ignored. Despite their uncertainty, and knowing the danger this mission would involve, they couldn't leave those kids to perish. Jack clenched his fists, meeting Rabbit's determined gaze. "We'll help," Jack said, his voice calm but with a hint of grim resolve. "But we'll need all the information we can get." On their way to the Iron Den orphanage, Harlequina decided to reach out to Valeris, an old contact of hers, a skilled spy who could gather information in a heartbeat. "I need intel, Valeris." "Circle of Flame, what do you know?" she muttered under her breath as they hurried through Doskvol's dim streets. Moments later, Valeris responded quickly. "The Circle of Flame had a falling out with the Dimmer sisters recently. This attack. It's probably just the Circle. Be careful." Harlequina's brow furrowed, the puzzle pieces falling into place. "Just the Circle of Flame, no Dimmer sisters," she whispered to herself. But as they neared the orphanage, something caught their eyes. Hovering just above the burning building, a large balloon flew low, its color pitch black, emblazoned with the emblem of the Dimmer sisters. Harlequina tensed. "That doesn't make sense. Why would they be here?" Jack, always sharp, narrowed his eyes, a knowing smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "It's a trick. The Circle of Flame are using the Dimmer sisters' emblem to throw off the blame. Make them look like the ones responsible." Rabbit Foot, growing more agitated by the second, cut through the tension. "We don't have time for this. We're wasting time." The kids, his eyes darted toward the blazing orphanage. He muttered a quick prayer under his breath, his voice trembling with both fear and determination. "Lady Luck, watch over me. Keep those kids alive." And with that, he dashed toward the orphanage, his heart set on reaching them before it was too late. "Rabbit, wait." Jack called, but he was already following, his loyalty to his friend pulling him into the danger without hesitation. Cuzão, torn between staying and running for more help, stopped, his breath ragged. I need to find more help. I can't just sit here, not while they're in there." His voice wavered, but his determination was clear. He turned to Harlequina and Harry, his eyes wide with desperation. "I'll be back. I swear it. Don't let them die." Harlequina nodded grimly, scanning the darkened streets for signs of a trap. "Go. We'll hold out as long as we can." Harry, his voice tense but focused, quickly sent a message to every crew they knew. "Help us. It's urgent." They couldn't wait for long, but Lonnik of the Ciphers responded almost immediately, his words brief and direct, "On my way." Harry exhaled, relieved. Reinforcements might be coming, but we don't know if they'll make it in time. As Jack and Rabbit reached the orphanage, they were spotted by the men on the balloon above. "Get down!" Jack barked, shoving Rabbit behind cover as oil and fire rained from the sky, the hiss and crackle of flames filling the air. "They're trying to burn us alive!" Jack shouted, rolling to the side as another wave of fire cascaded toward them. Rabbit, sweat pouring down his face, glared at the balloon. "We're not stopping," he growled, his eyes locked on the orphanage. "Those kids are in there, Jack. I'm not letting them die." Jack glanced at him, the firelight reflecting off his face, and nodded grimly. "Then let's go get them." As the flames raged around them, they pressed forward, desperate to reach the burning building before it was too late. Behind them, Harlequina and Harry moved carefully, their eyes sharp and alert for any traps. Harlequina clenched her fists. There's got to be more of them hiding, waiting to ambush us. Harry nodded, his wand ready. We'll handle it. We always do. But deep down, they knew this mission was unlike any other. The stakes were higher than ever. Harlequina and Harry watched from a distance as the balloon above began raining fire down on Jack and Rabbit. We've got to do something, Harry said urgently, his eyes wide with panic. Harlequina was already pulling out her rifle, her movements calm and calculated as she looked through the scope. I've got it, she muttered, focusing on the burner mechanism that kept the balloon aloft. With a steady breath, she pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, hitting the burner with pinpoint accuracy. Flames erupted from the balloon as the burner exploded, engulfing the men in the basket. The balloon began to fall from the sky, plummeting in a fiery descent. Harlequina watched with satisfaction before turning to Harry. That should buy us some time. Let's catch up with them. As they approached the orphanage, they found Jack and Rabbit already inside, standing over an unconscious man they had tied up. Rabbit flashed them a sheepish grin. In my rush, I might have knocked him out, by accident, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Jack, however, was more focused on the man's vest. Fire-retardant material, he said, tugging at the fabric. Without hesitation, he stripped off his own jacket and put on the vest. We'll need all the protection we can get. Through the windows of the reception room, they could see more figures roaming the grounds, their movements slow and methodical. The sounds of footsteps and low voices echoed from within the building. Jack's face hardened. They're everywhere. We've got to be careful. Rabbit, ever the gambler, grinned. Luck's on our side, Jack. Let's use it. He opened the door to the meeting rooms beyond the reception and called out, anyone in here? A man's head cautiously peeked around a corner, confused. Rabbit wasted no time. He lunged forward, slamming the man into the wall, disorienting him in one swift motion. Gotcha, Rabbit growled under his breath. As he noticed the man's vest, his eyes narrowed. Elite soldiers of the Circle of Flame. Heatwave and Firefly must be behind this. Before he could react further, another soldier rushed in to help his companion. Jack, always ready for action, swung his mace from around the corner, catching the man square in the chest. The force of the blow sent the man flying, crashing into the floor like a rag doll. Jack frowned, perplexed. No scream, no gasp, weird, he muttered. The man had landed awkwardly on top of a young boy, a teenager they hadn't noticed before. As they helped the boy up, recognition hit all of them at once. It was Ulf Ironborn, the fearless 15-year-old leader of the Ironborn gang. His sharp eyes met theirs, filled with a silent, burning intensity. Without a word, Ulf made a quick hand gesture for them to follow him. His face was set in a fierce expression, clearly determined to lead them through the danger. Jack started to speak, but Ulf cut him off with a swift motion of his hand, signaling for silence. His body language was clear, no talking, just follow. Jack exchanged a look with Rabbit, who simply shrugged. Looks like we're following the kid's lead, Rabbit whispered, but there was no mistaking the tension in his voice. Ulf moved with purpose, making quick hand gestures to indicate which direction to go. He was clearly familiar with the layout of the building, guiding them through narrow hallways and past rooms filled with danger. The crows followed, their steps cautious, their eyes scanning for threats. Harlequina, ever alert, kept her rifle at the ready, while Harry muttered quiet incantations, preparing for whatever they might face. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He had questions, but Ulf wasn't talking. Whatever was happening, they had to trust the young leader's instincts. Rabbit, still grinning despite the tension, whispered, looks like the kid knows what he's doing. Harlequina's eyes narrowed, watching Ulf carefully. He better. If we run into any more of those soldiers, we might not get as lucky. Ulf locked the door behind them and quickly pulled a large piece of wood to block off the window, plunging the room into near darkness. He turned, eyes sharp, scanning each of the crows. His voice was low, urgent, as he whispered, "Who the hell are you?" Jack stepped forward, his hands up in a gesture of peace. "We're here because of Cuzão. He came to us, begged for help. Said you and your group were under attack." Harry, standing a bit further back, added with a slight smirk, "We're the crows. You know, famous around these parts. We deal with problems." Ulf, breathing heavily, wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes never leaving Jack's. "I've never met you. I don't know you. But I don't have much of a choice right now, do I?" His voice was strained, but his guard was still up. "Cuzão did well getting away. I wasn't sure he'd make it." "We're here now," Jack said, his voice steady. "Just tell us what you need." Ulf hesitated for a moment, then gave in. "All right. We're under attack from the Circle of Flame. I don't know why, they didn't exactly send a note explaining. They've got most of my kids locked up in a makeshift cell on the other side of the building, in the toilets. I've counted at least 7 elite soldiers, more dangerous than the others, and 9 regular ones scattered throughout the place." 7 elites. Rabbit Foot whistled low under his breath. "That's a hell of a lot of firepower. How many have you taken down already?" Ulf's expression hardened. "1. I killed him just before your guy hit him with a hammer." He shot a glance at Jack, his gratitude mixed with a flash of irritation. "Thanks for that, by the way." Jack shrugged, didn't know he was already dead. Harlequina, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, narrowed her eyes. "And what about Firefly? He's in this mess, right?" Ulf's face darkened further. "Yeah. Firefly's in the building. He's holed up in a secure room with my friends, Dedinho and Boquinha. He's torturing them, trying to get them to tell him where I am. He's hunting me, but I won't leave my people behind." Harlequina's jaw tightened. "Firefly's in this building? Great. He's the kind of problem that doesn't go away easily. Why would the Circle of Flame come after you like this?" Jack asked, his voice curious but laced with urgency. "What do they want with a gang of kids?" Ulf shook his head. "I don't know. I don't have the luxury of figuring that out right now. Right now, I need to get my people out of here. If Firefly finds me, we're all as good as dead." Harry rubbed the back of his neck, thinking aloud, "So, what's the plan then? You can't just fight your way through a bunch of elites and expect to get everyone out." A flicker of a smile appeared on Ulf's lips, a sharp contrast to the tension in his eyes. "You're right, we won't be fighting our way out. We'll be moving in the shadows. They've got the place lit up like a damn fortress. If we cut the lights, they lose their advantage. If we can take out the lights, we can move under cover of darkness." Rabbit Foot's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Shadows, huh? I like that. A bit of luck on our side, and this'll be over in no time." Jack crossed his arms. "What's the end game, Ulf? Get the kids out? Take out Firefly?" Ulf's face was set with grim determination. "Rescue my kids first, and then we'll deal with Firefly. He's not leaving this place alive." Harry raised a hand, his voice cautious. "Wait. Let's be clear here. We cut the lights, rescue the kids, and, what? Fight our way through a building filled with elite soldiers? There's got to be more to it than that." Ulf nodded. "Once the lights go out, they'll be confused. We move fast, we hit hard, and we don't give them time to regroup. Firefly thinks he's in control, but that'll change once he's blind in the dark." Harlequina's eyes narrowed, her voice low. "And you trust us with this? You don't even know us." Ulf met her gaze, unwavering. "I don't have a choice. You're here, and I need help. If you're in, we do this together. Jack looked at his crew, reading their faces. Harlequina, always cautious but ready for a fight. Rabbit, eager to roll the dice. Harry, calculating the risks but willing to take them. He nodded slowly. All right. We're in. Let's get your kids out of here, and then we'll make sure Firefly regrets ever stepping foot in this place. Ulf gave a short, sharp nod. Good. Follow my lead. Stay quiet, and move fast. We're getting my people out, and we're taking down anyone who stands in our way. As Ulf began to lead them out of the room, he stopped abruptly at the door, glancing back at the crows with a serious expression. His voice dropped to a whisper, the weight of his words filling the dimly lit space. Look, guys, before we go any further, I need to tell you something. His gaze flicked between Jack, Rabbit Foot, Harry, and Harlequina, his tone growing more intense. I can feel it, 2 Millennium Items. You're carrying them. He paused, letting the gravity of his statement sink in. There are an unheard number of Millennium Items in this building right now. The Circle of Flame, they're obsessed with the Millennium Ring, you know that. If they find out there's even one in here, let alone more, they'll burn this whole neighborhood down to ash just to find them. We're all dead if they figure it out. The room fell silent. Harry Potter's brow furrowed as he tightened his grip on his Millennium Rod inside his coat, his mind racing with the implications. You're sure about this? He asked, voice strained. His eyes flickered with the weight of responsibility he hadn't fully realized he was carrying. How can they sense them? I mean, what do we do? Ulf's gaze was steely. Keep them a secret. Don't let them know. There's already a rumor spreading through Doskvol, the Millennium Ring was stolen from the Deadland Woods by some unknown crew. If they figure out it's in this building, or that more items are here, it's over. They'll burn us alive. Rabbit Foot and Harry exchanged tense looks. Rabbit's easy-going demeanor faltered for just a moment, his usual confident grin slipping away as the weight of the situation settled on him. A third Millennium Item, huh? Rabbit muttered under his breath. His eyes flicked to Harry, then to the door, a deep sense of unease swirling in his chest. Damn. I guess it makes sense now, why things have been feeling off lately. Harry clenched his jaw, feeling the pressure building. So, they know something was stolen, but they don't know it was us. Yet, Rabbit added, his voice low, almost a whisper. His mind was already racing, thinking of the consequences. He'd been so careful. So precise in keeping the secret of the Millennium Ring. But Doskvol had its ways, whispers spread like wildfire in this city, and he was just beginning to understand how fragile this secret really was. He made a mental note, his thoughts a chaotic swirl. They know someone has the ring. They don't know it's me. But they will. If I'm not careful, if I slip even once, they'll figure it out. The ring, hidden beneath his coat, felt heavier now, almost burning against his skin. It wasn't just a powerful artifact anymore. It was a target. A curse. One wrong move, and the entire city could come crashing down on him. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Harlequina broke the silence, her tone sharp and determined. We'll keep it hidden. No one needs to know what we're carrying. Her eyes met Rabbit's, then Harry's, her resolve clear. We're not losing anyone today. Not to the Circle of Flame, not to Firefly, not to anyone. Ulf nodded once, sharply. Good. Be careful. His gaze lingered on them for a moment longer before he turned and left the room first, moving swiftly and silently down the hallway. As the door creaked shut behind him, Rabbit Foot and Harry stood in the lingering silence. Rabbit let out a slow breath, his fingers brushing against the hidden ring beneath his clothes. The city already knows someone took it. But nobody knows I'm the one who has it. His voice was low, contemplative. And I'm gonna keep it that way. Harry glanced at him, eyes narrowed with understanding. You're right. We can't afford to let this slip. Not with everything else at stake. He shifted his weight, his mind running through all the possibilities, all the threats they now faced. But we need to find out who has that third item, too. We can't be blindsided. Rabbit nodded, his usual carefree attitude replaced with a rare, somber seriousness. Yeah, you're right. We'll figure it out. But for now, his gaze hardened, his thoughts turning back to the task at hand. We need to keep those kids alive and get the hell out of here. Inside the room, the crows could feel the tension rising. Ulf's warning still echoed in their ears, but Jack knew they couldn't afford to wait any longer. He looked at the others, urgency clear in his voice. We can't sit around here any longer. We need to move. Determined, Jack stripped the uniform from the unconscious circle of flame soldier, pulling on the fire-retardant outfit and adjusting it snugly. I'll lure one of them in and set the trap, he said, his voice tinged with resolve. Harry, breathing heavily, nodded, his fingers trembling slightly. All right. I'll summon something. Something that'll scare the daylights out of them. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. The pages of his old spellbook flashed in his mind, and a deep uncertainty settled in his gut. He had never attempted a summoning like this. He whispered under his breath, the words of the incantation foreign, twisting his tongue. His eyes began to glow a fiery red, and Harry could feel a rush of something dark, something powerful, surge within him. He clenched his jaw, hoping, praying that he could control it. From the shadows, a monstrous form began to take shape, a terrible creature, humanoid in stature but twisted, with 5 ghastly faces and 10 grotesque arms that writhed and reached, each one a nightmare of claws and sinew. It lurked in the corner, waiting for Jack's cue. Harry swallowed hard, whispering to himself, please, hold, just hold a little longer. Jack slipped out into the corridor, his eyes darting around as he spotted another circle of flame soldier approaching. He took a deep breath, letting fear, real fear for his friends, for the mission, come through in his voice. Hey! You there! Jack called out, his voice pitched with panic. Help me! There's a monster, a freak, an abomination. You have to see this. The other soldier hesitated, his brows furrowing. Jack widened his eyes, his expression frantic, letting a shudder run through him as if barely containing his terror. I'm telling you, it's huge. We need everyone for this. The soldier, uncertain but unwilling to appear cowardly, nodded and followed Jack. They rounded the corner, and Jack pointed towards the shadowed recess where Harry's creature awaited. The soldier's eyes went wide as he caught sight of it, a mass of writhing arms, eyes staring into his very soul. He let out a scream, pure terror spilling from his throat. Oh gods! What is that? The soldier turned, panic overcoming him as he shoved past Jack in his blind desperation. He bolted for the door, his one thought to escape, his mind filled only with the need to get as far away from that horror as possible. He never noticed Rabbit Foot, crouched just inside the shadows of the entrance, waiting for his opportunity. Rabbit watched, his pulse steady, his eyes sharp. The terrified man's screams echoed in his ears as he rushed past, and Rabbit's lips curled in a small smile. Lady Luck, keep smiling on me, he whispered, as he heard another voice from just beyond the door, a second circle of flame member, drawn by the commotion, stepping into his trap. Rabbit tensed, waiting for just the right moment. The chaos above and the unnatural stillness of Harry's summoning crept into the room, but Rabbit was unfazed. This was his game, one of opportunity, one of luck. And tonight, luck was on their side. Rabbit Foot stood silently at the front door, his heart steady, the knife poised in his hand. The circle of flame soldier, the one whose footsteps had been steadily approaching, entered the orphanage. In one fluid movement, Rabbit seized him, pressing the cold blade against his throat. The man's eyes went wide for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure, his face twisting into a sneer. "You think this will save you?" he spat. "We're the circle of flame. You're all dead by dawn." Heatwave himself gave the order. Rabbit tightened his grip, leaning in close to whisper into the man's ear, his voice dripping with calm menace. "Is that right? You think Heatwave scares me? You're gonna answer some questions, or I'll show you a real reason to be scared." He kept his voice level, each word measured, as if this was merely a game to him, a game he was used to winning. The soldier scowled but said nothing, his eyes filled with disdain. Rabbit's blade pressed just a little harder, enough to make the man wince. "What are you doing here tonight?" Rabbit asked, his voice sharp. "Isn't it obvious?" The soldier sneered again. "We're here for Ulf Ironborn and whatever he's hiding." He paused, his expression defiant. "But you'll be dead long before you ever understand why." Rabbit smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. He'd heard enough to know what they were after. His mind turned back to Ulf's warning about the Millennium Items. It had to be the item Ulf carried. The soldier clearly wasn't going to say any more, but Rabbit still had a crucial question left. "Where are the kids?" he demanded, his voice darkening. The soldier hesitated for a moment, but then spoke. "They're held in makeshift cells, deeper in the orphanage. Hostages, leverage against that brat you're so keen on helping." A plan was beginning to form in Rabbit's mind, a risky one, but one that might give them the upper hand. He needed to get closer, and he knew exactly how to do it. Slowly, deliberately, he withdrew the knife from the soldier's throat and tossed it aside. The metallic clang echoed in the narrow corridor. The circle of flame soldier's confusion was palpable. His eyebrows knitted together, his face a mask of disbelief. What are you doing?" he stammered. Rabbit raised his hands in surrender, his expression smug. "Take me to your boss, to the cells. You wanted me, didn't you?" His voice was laced with sarcasm, but there was something more, an air of confidence, like he had everything under control. The soldier stared at him, then slowly smiled, an incredulous laugh escaping his lips. "You think this is some kind of joke?" The soldier grabbed Rabbit roughly, pulling his hands behind his back, tying them tightly. "You really think surrendering will save you?" He grinned, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is the last mistake you'll ever make." As Rabbit was dragged through the dim corridors of the orphanage, the echoes of footsteps filled the silent space. Jack, disguised in the fire-retardant outfit, appeared further down the corridor. He approached, looking every bit the loyal Circle of Flame member. As he passed by Rabbit, he gave the slightest nod, barely a tilt of his head, to let Rabbit know he understood that this was all part of the plan. Rabbit returned the nod, his heart steady as ever. It was all falling into place. The corridors wound and twisted, and soon they passed a room where Rabbit caught sight of Harlequina and Ulf, emerging silently from a vent, their eyes darting around, scanning for threats. Harlequina's eyes locked on Rabbit, her expression a mix of shock and confusion, but he gave her a nod, just like he'd given Jack, a signal, a reassurance that everything was under control. Ulf, however, wasn't convinced. The young leader's face twisted in fury, his eyes burning with frustration. As soon as they were out of the vent and back on the ground, Ulf turned to Harlequina, his gestures sharp and angry, his voice a harsh whisper. "Are you kidding me?" he hissed. "Is this your plan? To get yourselves captured one by one? What the hell are you people doing?" Harlequina's eyes narrowed, her own frustration bubbling to the surface. "Hey, watch it, kid," she snapped, her whisper barely restrained. "You don't get to question our methods. We came here to help you, risking our necks for your gang, for your kids. And Rabbit knows what he's doing." Ulf's eyes flashed, his voice trembling with anger. "What he's doing is getting himself caught, and now he's a liability. If they catch him, they'll know everything. They'll kill us all." Harlequina's fists clenched, and she leaned in closer, her voice low and fierce. You think we don't know that? We've faced worse than this, Ulf. We are not the enemy here. We're trying to save your people. If you can't see that, then maybe you're not as smart as you think you are. Ulf glared at her, his jaw set, but he had no response. Instead, he turned sharply away, moving toward the door that led further into the orphanage. He spoke without looking back, his voice edged with bitterness. I can't afford to get caught here with you. My people need me, not more risks. Harlequina watched him go, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and something else, something almost like pity. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. They were all under immense pressure, and she knew Ulf was scared, not just for himself, but for those he felt responsible for. Fine, she whispered to herself, shaking her head. But we're getting those kids out of here. Whether he believes in us or not. With that resolve, she turned back to the vent, ready to keep moving, ready to prove to Ulf, to herself, and to everyone that the crows weren't just a group of reckless fools, that they could be the salvation those kids needed tonight. Jack was leading the two circle of flame soldiers through the winding corridors of the orphanage. His heart raced, but he kept his outward demeanor composed, doing everything he could to play the part of an anxious and loyal grunt. But beneath the surface, his mind was in overdrive, hurrying the soldiers along. He wasn't sure how much longer Harry could control that nightmare of a creature he had summoned. The two soldiers exchanged anxious glances, their voices carrying softly as they ran, unaware of the true identity of the man leading them. Firefly's losing his mind, you know, one of them muttered. If we don't find Ulf Ironborn soon, he's going to burn this whole damn place down. We're running out of time. The second soldier huffed in frustration. Yeah, and those kids aren't talking either. We can't keep waiting forever. If we don't find Ulf soon, Firefly said, we'll just have to leave without him. The boss isn't one to keep waiting. Jack's stomach turned at that revelation. They had two kids in a different room, being tortured for information. If they were running out of time, then the crows had a very slim window to save those kids, and to stop Firefly from escalating things beyond control. Jack's determination solidified into steel as they approached the darkened intersection where he was supposed to meet Harry. But when they reached the agreed point, Jack's heart dropped. The creature Harry had summoned, the monstrous, twisted abomination that had been meant to be their trap, was gone. Harry must have lost control. Panic shot through Jack for just a moment before he steeled himself again. There was no time for panic. They needed to act, now. Without hesitation, Jack stopped, turned sharply, and pulled out his gun. He pressed the barrel against the side of one of the soldiers' heads. His voice was like ice. End of the line, boys. I'm not who you think I am. The sudden change left both circle of flame soldiers wide-eyed, their expressions flipping from confusion to anger. Before the second soldier could even react, Harry emerged from a room further down the hallway, a gun in his hands aimed directly at him. The boy's eyes were fierce, his stance unwavering. A split second later, Harlequina stepped out from another side room, her gun raised as well, pointed at both men. Drop them, Harlequina ordered, her voice steady and firm. The two circle of flame soldiers looked around, realizing they were surrounded, completely outgunned. The first soldier swallowed hard, his gun falling to the ground with a clatter. The second hesitated for a moment, staring at Harry, then at the other two guns trained on him, before slowly lowering his weapon to the floor. The crows had them, despite the lost monster, the ambush still worked. Jack exhaled, feeling a small rush of relief. He raised his voice slightly, speaking not to the men in front of him but to something beyond, something unseen. I hope you can still help these kids, and us, he said, his voice echoing in the dim, shadowed hall. It was a gamble, a desperate, last-ditch bet. Jack remembered Jackie Combier, the enigmatic leader of the unseen, the man who claimed to always be watching, who spoke of demons that lived in the shadows. Jack had seen that power in action before, and if Jackie really was always watching when it mattered. The gamble paid off. Out of the darkness, two shadowy figures materialized behind the circle of flame soldiers. They were amorphous at first, silhouettes shifting in the dimness before becoming distinct. One of them turned, locking eyes with Jack, giving a slow, deliberate nod. Then, as silently as they had arrived, the figures took hold of the two soldiers, and disappeared back into the shadows. The circle of flame men were simply gone, as if they'd never been there at all. Harlequina's eyes widened as she lowered her gun. "That power is freaky," she muttered, shaking her head slightly in disbelief. Harry nodded, still staring at the spot where the figures had vanished. "Way too powerful," he added, his voice tinged with both awe and a flicker of fear. He couldn't shake the image of those shadow figures, and he could feel the chill down his spine that came from knowing such beings existed, and that they could be anywhere, unseen. Jack took a deep breath, holstering his weapon. The path was clear, and they had a mission. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice firm. "We've got to find Rabbit and get those kids." Rabbit Foot gritted his teeth, trying to ignore the rough handling as the circle of flame soldier dragged him to the makeshift cells. The soldier yanked on his arm with a ferocity that left bruises, but Rabbit didn't care. Pain wasn't what mattered right now. No, what mattered was the knife he had hidden up his sleeve, a secret he was holding on to until the right moment. He let the soldier drag him, let him think he was in control, because in just a few moments, Rabbit knew he'd turn the tables. They reached the makeshift cells, an old, dark room in the orphanage where crude bars had been erected across the doorways. The soldier opened the door, ready to throw Rabbit inside, and that's when Rabbit acted. In one swift motion, he twisted his arm free, grabbed the knife, and used the soldier's own momentum to force him to the ground. The man gasped in surprise as Rabbit got the upper hand. Rabbit leaned in, whispering with a smirk. "You guys really need to work on how you handle your captives. Not a very secure job, if you ask me." He quickly subdued the soldier, pinning him down and glancing back at the frightened group of children behind the bars. "All right, kids," he said, his voice urgent but gentle. "Come on, help me out. We're getting out of here. Quietly, now." The children moved hesitant at first, their eyes wide with fear, but a spark of hope flashed across their faces as Rabbit freed them from the cell. There were 14 boys in all, most of them young, between 6 and 10 years old, some with bruised faces, cuts on their lips and foreheads. It broke Rabbit's heart to see them like that, but there was no time for pity. They needed to move. One of the older boys, probably about 10, glared down at the soldier Rabbit had pinned to the floor. With a scowl, he swung a fist down and smashed the man's nose. "That's for hurting us, you bastard," the boy spat, his voice shaking with anger. Rabbit didn't stop him. He knew that these kids needed to feel like they had some power again after what they'd endured. He only nodded, then gestured for them to move quietly. In the corner, 2 tiny boys caught his attention. They couldn't have been older than 3. They were twins, crouched together, playing make-believe as if they were in some other world, roaring softly at each other like dinosaurs, blissfully unaware of the danger. Rabbit's heart clenched. He couldn't imagine what it must be like for such young children in this nightmare. He gently picked them up, one in each arm, and motioned for the others to follow him. They moved swiftly and silently down the dark corridor, their footsteps almost soundless on the dusty floor. After a short distance, Rabbit met Harry Potter, who emerged from the shadows with a look of urgency in his eyes. "Rabbit, we need to get out of here," Harry said, his voice strained. "But there's a problem. There are 2 other kids, they're being tortured in another room. Firefly and his elite soldiers are with them." Rabbit's eyes darkened. "We can't leave them behind, Harry. These kids, all of them, deserve better." He was determined, there was no question in his mind about what they had to do. Harry nodded, but his expression was tense. He glanced at the 2 small twins in Rabbit's arms. Be careful with the Blackwood twins, he said quietly. I just ran into Ulf, and he warned me about them. He said, they're different. Dangerous, even. But they're also innocent. We need to protect them. Rabbit looked down at the two little boys, their wide eyes staring up at him in innocent curiosity. Dangerous? They looked anything but. Yet, Ulf's warning weighed on his mind. He nodded. All right. But let's keep them safe. We'll do what we have to do. Harry's face lit up with an idea. I'll keep the twins with me for now. I'm going to go look for the cell where they're holding the girls. The girls will know how to care for the little ones better than we can. They'll keep the twins calm. Rabbit hesitated for a moment, then nodded. It made sense. The girls were likely to be gentler with the kids, and it would be a safer option. All right, he said. Get them to safety, Harry. I'll send the older boys along the safe path we used before. Then I'm coming to help you get those girls out. The two crows shared a determined look before they set their plan into motion. Rabbit led the older boys back toward the entrance of the building, instructing them to keep low and stick to the shadows. Once they were on their way, he turned back, moving quietly alongside Harry toward the cells holding the girls. When they found the cell, there was another problem. A circle of flame soldier was standing guard outside the door, pacing impatiently. Rabbit paused, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. Harry was right behind him, and he whispered softly, "What's the plan, Rabbit?" Rabbit's lips curled into a determined smirk. "We're not leaving without those girls. Stay behind me, and be ready. Let's do this smart." Rabbit's foot moved silently down the corridor, each step carefully calculated to slip by the guard unnoticed. He held his breath, watching the soldiers back as he took another cautious step forward. But luck wasn't on his side this time. The floor creaked, and the guard spun around, his eyes widening in surprise before he raised his gun. Rabbit didn't have time to react, and before he could make a move, the soldier opened fire. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The muzzle flash was bright in the darkness, and the shot rang out, echoing off the narrow walls. In an instant, Harry leaped into the line of fire. His skin hardened to stone just as the bullet struck him, ricocheting off his chest. But even with his quick reaction, the bullet's deflection sent it into the room, grazing one of the girls on the leg. She cried out, her voice echoing painfully in the confined space. "Damn it!" Rabbit shouted, his eyes narrowing. He lunged forward at the soldier, using the moment of shock from seeing Harry's transformation to his advantage. Harry, wincing slightly, used his stone fists to push the guard back against the wall, and the two struggled for control of the weapon. The soldier snarled, thrashing, but Rabbit moved quickly, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it until the gun fell to the floor. The door to the corridor suddenly burst open, and Jack and Harlequina rushed in. "What the hell is going on here?" Jack shouted, taking in the chaos before running to help Rabbit. Harlequina, with her fierce expression, didn't wait. She grabbed a wooden chair and swung it with precision, breaking it across the guard's back. The soldier stumbled, disoriented, and Jack took the opportunity to punch him hard, dropping him to the floor for good. "Nice work," Rabbit panted, catching his breath. Despite the chaos, he looked over at the twins, who were now in the care of the girls. They didn't seem too rattled, just curious, their innocent eyes wide as they watched everything unfold. The older girl who had been shot held her leg, wincing, but she managed a brave smile. "It's okay," she whispered to the twins. "Everything's okay now." Harry looked at Rabbit with a mixture of worry and relief. "I think we're all right for now. But we need to move. Firefly's still out there, and he's not going to let this slide." Jack nodded, his eyes already on the hallway leading further into the building. "We're not done until Firefly's taken care of. Let's finish this." The group moved as one, carefully maneuvering through the orphanage until they found the room where Firefly was holed up. Just before they approached the door, Ulf slipped out of the shadows and joined them. He nodded in gratitude at Rabbit, Harry, and Jack, his face a mix of exhaustion and fury. "Thank you for freeing the young ones. But now it's time to put an end to this. I have a plan to blow the bastards to pieces. I just need to make sure Didinho and Boquinha are safe first." Jack looked at Ulf, then back at the door. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "All right. I'll go in first. See if I can fool them long enough to get the boys out." Jack stepped through the door, his posture tense but his expression calm as he walked into the room where Firefly and his elite soldiers stood. Firefly turned immediately, his eyes narrowing as he looked Jack up and down. For a moment, there was a flicker of suspicion, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. He didn't even get a chance to speak before Firefly's lips curled into a furious sneer. "You think I can't see through your disguise, you pathetic rat?" Firefly barked, his voice dripping with scorn. He nodded to his soldiers, who immediately raised their weapons, ready to fire. But Jack had come prepared. He reached into his coat, pulling out the magical item he had saved for a moment like this, the veil. The moment he activated it, a shroud of darkness enveloped the entire room, plunging it into a deep, impenetrable gloom. Only Jack could see through it. "Move fast," he whispered to himself, adrenaline surging through him. He could see Firefly and his men panicking, their guns firing wildly into the darkness. The deafening crack of bullets echoed in the confined space, each flash of muzzle fire lighting up the dark for only an instant before vanishing again. Jack felt the searing pain of 2 bullets grazing him, but he grit his teeth, refusing to slow down. He had a mission. He rushed to where Didinho and Boquinha were tied, their terrified eyes wide in the darkness. "Hold on, I've got you," Jack said, his voice low and calm despite the chaos. He worked quickly, untying their bonds, all the while ducking and weaving as the blind shots whizzed around him. Firefly's furious voice boomed through the room, his rage palpable as he ordered his men to find and kill Jack. "Hurry!" Jack hissed at the boys, pushing them towards the door. With his guidance, they managed to slip out of the room, just as more shots rang out. The veil of darkness still covered their escape, and Jack stayed close behind them, shielding them as they moved. They burst out into the hallway, where Ulf was waiting. Jack gave him a nod, the pain from his wound starting to weigh on him, but the relief of getting the boys out fueling his determination. "They're safe. Now it's your turn, Ulf. Do what you need to." Ulf looked at Jack with a fierce intensity. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Get out of here. I can handle this." He turned and slipped back into the building, his form quickly swallowed by the shadows as he moved to enact his plan. The crows moved fast, Didinho and Boquinha huddled close as they made their way out of the building. They ran across the garden, the cold night air biting at their skin, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. They didn't stop until they were on the street, just as the explosion sounded behind them, a deep, reverberating boom that shook the ground beneath their feet. Jack, Harry, Harlequina, and Rabbit Foot turned, their eyes widening as a massive column of black smoke rose from the orphanage. For a moment, there was silence, an eerie, heavy stillness as they watched the flames lick at the night sky. "Do you think," Harry started, his voice trailing off. "Whether Firefly and Ulf made it or not," Jack replied, his voice quiet, "we can't worry about that now. We've done what we came here to do. Let's get these kids to safety." The distant wail of sirens began to echo through the streets, and they knew the law enforcement was closing in. They shared a look, each one of them battered, bruised, but still standing. "Come on," Rabbit said, his voice soft but firm. "It's time to go. For better or worse, this mission is done." With that, they turned, disappearing into the maze of Doskvol's dark streets, leaving the flames and smoke, and the uncertain fate of those left behind them.